Greetings, I'm glad you could join me on this series of strategic thinking in spite of competition by Rensel Integro, which is East Africa's fastest growing management and strategy consulting firm. The intention of this series is to be able to break down strategic management, to make it easier for scholars of strategic management, leaders and practitioners and policymakers to understand step by step the different theories of strategic management and how to use them in strategic leadership. So let's dive right in and do the first strategic management theory, which is the industrial organization theory. This is a theory that was developed by economists back in the 50s, and the whole idea was to make it possible for practitioners to plan budgets effectively. And the whole idea about it is that the industry was more of a factor that determined success of firms compared to the internal resources that you had as a firm, all right? So the industry was more important than the internal resources. So if you enter into an industry, then you have to understand what is the structure and what are the forces determining the performance in that industry more than what you have as a firm. So this theory was popularized by one Michael Porter in his works in 1980. And the whole idea again was to bring out the fact that the structure of a firm affects the conduct of that firm. Therefore, it affects the performance of that same firm. So the question you could ask yourself is, why could we have one industry being more attractive than the other industry? For example, why would the telco industry in Kenya be more luxurious or more profitable compared to a hotel industry? So there are a few things I'd like us to have a look at, apply this to a Kenyan context. Look at it from the context of an example in a local farm, and also look at it in an example from a global south farm, that is a farm within the larger African region. So let's see an example like Safaricom. Safaricom has been well endowed and of course has performed quite well in the telco industry. And the reason being is that industry is more structured and more ready to right in favor Safaricom compared to entrants in that industry. So the structure, including the forces, including the regulatory frameworks, the barriers of entry, the infrastructure needed to support entry into that industry, are more favorable to larger firms, dominant firms compared to smaller firms. So Safaricom's existence and success in the industry has been more attributed to the structure of the industry, which is more favorable for larger firms compared to me who would want to establish a firm in that same industry. Another example is in the larger African region, what we call Global South region, is Dangote, which is the cement manufacturing firm in Nigeria. So I mean, I'm sure we all would want to have a larger firm the size of Dangote, but what is most likely to limit us from getting into that industry would be the forces and the structure that may not be forgiving, or may not be flexible enough to allow a small firm to enter the industry. And so what I'd like you to take home from this is that when you're going into war, when you're going into an industry, before you invest in your strategic plan, before you invest and decide on a strategy, you need to understand the war the industry you're getting into, because some battles are better won in certain industries than others. Some wars are worth fighting, or some are not worth fighting. So before you invest in an industry, understand the structure of that industry and whether or not it favors your existence in that industry.